Thank you very much, colleagues. I just spilled a glass of water over Aislinn's computer there, so if the conference doesn't go ahead in the morning, it's all my fault. Fraternal greetings from the NUJ. There's around 4,000 members in the Journalists Union. I'm currently the chairperson of the Irish Executive Council. I believe I'm the first journalist maybe to address a conference such as this, particularly in the union context, and I'm genuinely honoured and privileged. I think it's, I don't have any PowerPoint presentations, as you can see, so I'm not into the technology, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately. And I'm very impressed at the way that your chairperson and Des has said that everybody's going to be here at 10 o'clock in the morning, because we're going to have cameras here at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going to count how many delegates are here, because my knowledge of trade union conferences and the early morning starts is going to be tested tomorrow morning and see how it goes. With that in mind as well, some people would say, I suppose, a bit of light relief because we've had such a heavy session for the afternoon for a minute. The idea of having doing a piece to camera, when I would do a piece to camera in front of the telly, I'm going to stay around for this famous or infamous barbecue tonight, the only barbecue that is held indoors, I believe, and I believe he started it in the West County Hotel a few years ago. So if you don't see me on the telly tomorrow, it'll probably be because of a little hangover. A few years ago, I worked on a programme called Ear to the Ground. You might remember it. And Ear to the Ground basically started, and I was working in Wicklow at the time, from Wicklow, playing football for Newtown Mount Kennedy on the east coast, and a guy from the west of the county, Donard the Glen. I don't know, is anybody here from Donard the Glen? Junior football in Wicklow, again, very cultured sort of event. And They played us over in Newtown Mount Kennedy, and I had just been on the programme the night before doing a story about sheep farming, and this guy from the west obviously thought, how could this Jack Ian be doing anything about sheep farming when he's from basically close to Dublin? He must know nothing about sheep farming, so he obviously took great umbrage at this, and I got the ball in midfield after around 10 minutes in the game, cleared it up, and I just turned around, and as I turned, this massive fist down the back of the head, and I hit the ground, and the phrase was, "Ear to the ground now, you bollocks." So I didn't do a piece to camera the next time on that, and he only got booked. The ref thought it was a great little thing that he did, and fair play to him and all that sort of stuff. On the serious matter, I won't keep you too long because I know everybody's probably dying for a drink and it's getting a bit late. The serious matter is I'm delighted to be addressing you on this, and obviously I'm going to shorten the speech a little bit because things are running a bit over, and also to give time, if there is even for 5 or 10 minutes at the end for questions, because that's obviously where the issue can be really addressed. I spoke at a conference in Ballinasloe there last October with the Association of Community Nurses, and that worked out very well. So I think the discussion thing is very, very important. My interest in this, somebody asked me earlier, where did it come from? My uncle took his own life on a farm in Clune around 10 years ago. And from that, and being a journalist, not being precious with words, but being a bit pernickety, I've always sort of looked to see how other journalists and myself would be reporting on issues with mental health and with suicide. So there's such a broad topic on this in terms of, can the media influence mental health issues? Obviously the answer I would say is yes, and I'll go to explain why. And also if there's other topics that I'm just putting out there, if you want to raise a few questions on, please feel free to do so. Journalists, in my opinion, we're like any other group of workers in the country. We're subject to the same pressures in society, the same economic pressures that are out there at the moment. Some journalists see themselves in a very elevated position. They think they're chocolate, basically. As I said in Ballinasloe, most of them are really only Marmite. They don't really taste that good. They don't really look that good. And they're not really going to be representative journalists. So what I'm saying here today, again, has to be taken on that point of view. Another journalist will give you a different opinion. And that's one of the problems with this issue, and the issue that's out there at the moment very specifically regarding a lot of print media in particular, the way that they're approaching sensationalising stories, and they're doing that sort of stuff. And particularly as well, the influence of the Fourth Estate pressures from England, where journalism has changed dramatically in the last 20 years. I would argue since Wapping, basically, and again a very specific industrial issue that then fed its way all the way through to how journalism is reported. And a lot of journalists in the UK, in Britain, are looked upon as, in the phrase, scumbags. And that's a terrible indictment of journalism, and that's beginning to creep in here, and it's something that we in the NUJ want to not see happening, of course. Today is the second anniversary, believe it or not, of the Dunn family tragedy in Monageer. So again, it's appropriate to be speaking on something such as this. And I'll touch on the issue of murder and suicide in a few minutes. One of the issues that came up at that Ballinasloe conference is that obviously the world is a very sad place at the moment, a very difficult place. There's a lot of bad news around. Should we be reporting all that bad news? And how we report that is very, very important. An old news editor in RTE said a few years ago to me that news is when the bus is late, not when it's on time. And that remains true today. So unfortunately, our human nature, as it is, we will report bad news, whether it's over the kitchen table, you'll go home and it's the first thing you'll say, the bad thing that happened at work. It's very difficult to know then when to put in good news, but it's also, a lot of news editors are conscious that if you have too much bad news, you'll alienate a certain section of the population, and also you can be responsible for people's mental health deteriorating even further, and that's something that's very, very crucial. But because of the pressures of the market, the pressures of selling newspapers or getting the story out on TV, maybe not as badly serviced at the moment because of the public service broadcast remit that RTE would have, but the pressures are there between the different media to get their stories out there and to sell their stories and to get as many people buying those newspapers. My personal view of journalism is that we should present the facts, at the same time aim to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. If I can do something in a daily report or on a report in the news that can make a difference in a person's life, I will try and do that, but I don't want to overstate the importance of the media in that respect. A lot of journalists don't realise that a lot of the people that are working on the coalface with mental health issues, yourselves in particular, they don't realise that you're the ones that make the real difference. Again, they have this elevated opinion about themselves that if they do a report in a certain way, they'll have the sort of final say, look, I'm a sort of a pretend psychiatrist or psychologist, and I know what really happened in the Monageer situation or Clonroach, another Wexford situation there. They don't realise that it's you're the people who are making the real difference. I'm going to suggest that that's a message that maybe how you're going to get that across, you may need to reevaluate that in the future, particularly obviously in the current economic climate when, unfortunately, mental health issues are going to become more relevant and prevalent. And I've been watching local newspapers the last few months, and the amount of suicides, high-profile suicides in local areas with businessmen taking their own lives in particular. And especially in the times, as we've discussed, and you've discussed earlier and will be tomorrow, where mental health services and health services are being hit hard, suicide prevention posts not being filled and probably never going to be filled. Specifically, what can be done? I suppose the PNA has engaged with other organisations in the past and continues to do so. The association, I think, can engage with the Press Council of Ireland. They're currently reviewing the issue of suicide, the manner in which suicide is covered by newspapers. Aware has obviously done a lot of work. The Irish Association of Suicidology, the Samaritans, there are media guidelines that are out there. One very specific way of doing it is the NUJ has a series of branches around the country, just like yourselves. I think you should go back to your branches and try and contact the local NUJ branch and see if you can do a talk at the next branch meeting, just saying what you do and what issues that you would like to see covered in the media. There's very little engagement sometimes between journalists' unions, journalist representatives and other organisations, and I think that's a very specific way, because a lot of the journalism that people get obviously would be from local